continue, inshallah, with the deception of shaitan. Shaitan is enemy of Allah, enemy of the believers. Very smart, very cunning, very, very experienced in what he does. And we've gone through so many different things that, how he, he does one thing and it doesn't work, it does another thing, another thing, another thing. So all these, details we see Imam Al-Jawzi going through to give us an understanding, preparation for who we are dealing with. Repelling al-Wajd.
Okay. What is al-Wajd?
Yeah, here al-Wajd يعني I think يعني I think, can we go down? Because I'm trying to, it's from wujud, يعني from just existence or awareness. And because it says here, and Musa was basically, he fell down unconscious then. Abdullah bin Wahab fainted after listening to a book about the calamities of their judgment and died a few days later without saying a word. Many people died and many people fainted after listening to a sermon. As for Wajd, that includes yelling and trembling. It is clear that it is the act that is supported by the devil. So if someone asked if a Wajd happened to a sincere person, would that still be condemned? The answer is yes, for two reasons. He had the strong knowledge, he would have stopped. And okay, so it's like uncontrolled, like wailing and, like people sometimes recite the Quran and they start like wailing and screaming and this and that. And this is what Ibn Al-Jawzi says, that al-Wajd means. And number two here says that was not the way the companions campaigned. So they didn't like do that, right? Like sometimes they would cry, they would feel a certain way, but that was not like their behavior where they're just like start acting like that and being erratic like that and emotional like that, right? Shivering and doing all kinds of things when they hear the Quran or dhikr or anything like that. What we do here, Umar Khattab radiallahu anh, sometimes he would remember something or he would hear something and he would like faint, right? And here, see, Umar Khattab was like that was just, it's not like he would wait for something to be recited. His sincerity is undoubtful. Right? I mean, there's no way that anyone would doubt the sincerity of Khattab radiallahu anh other than the Shia. Right? May Allah, guide them. But like he would never do it on purpose. It was just, that was his level of taqwa. He would actually fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to that extent that if you would hear a reminder like that, he would definitely like faint sometimes. So maybe they took it from there, these Sufis, these people, and then they started like, because honestly, like sometimes you listen to recitation, you listen to imams leading, some of the things that they do, and it's kind of like strange, like it's not necessarily equivalent to behavior of Sunnah. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
You mean like the Shia, when they celebrate the Ashura, Kabbalah, they would do all sorts of chanting and things like that, and they become like not conscious,
Right,
hurting themselves.
right. Exactly. Right. But that's like, again, it's like induced state of whatever they're trying to do. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Right. So, yeah, that's something that you find again in people who are behaving that way. No, it's a bid'ah, and if people try to act like that, a righteous man doesn't behave that way. He does, avoid it. Like if he feels that that's something that's going to come upon himself. Now, so here, section 3 talks about excitement. Right? Clapping. If you think about clapping, and it is something that you'll be imitating women when they are to correct someone if they make a mistake in salah, right? And that's exactly what it says here. Clapping, right? It's like why would you do that? You women are doing that, and it's not here to put down women, but how do women correct? Men say Subhanallah, right? If there's a mistake, and the women will clap. Right? That's how they're supposed to react to if there's a mistake, like let's say someone forgot ruku or forgot one sujood or something happened. Right? That's what they do to draw the attention. Right? So that's where he is saying like this is an imitation of women if someone were to do that. Okay.
Question, Sheikh. Is clapping of hands permissible in Islam? Because I have heard many years ago that this clapping is not permissible.
Okay, so good question. So clapping for to appreciate someone or anything like that, many of the ulama said it's not permissible. It's only permissible to attract the attention of the imam. So if a bunch of women are praying behind them and no one notices something or whatever, then they clap as opposed to using their voice during salah. That's the only time that is like kind of warranted by the Sharia. Now, some of them have said that let's not something like bad or and so on. But again, Allah Alam, and I think the opinion that's closer to truth is that we shouldn't be clapping, for people. Now, people will make takbirs, for example, right? If they get excited about something instead of clapping, and so on. So yeah, Allah, I mean, there's a difference in opinion, but in general, I think most scholars will say that it's not permissible, and it's only permissible for women during salah. If there's a mistake, let's say the imam makes a mistake and no one corrects him, a woman can clap her hands and the imam will realize, okay, something is wrong. I made a mistake or something. No. If the excitement increases, they dance. And that's something very interesting with the Sufis, that they do dance quite a lot. And they get into these trends. I saw this today, an interesting video, subhanAllah, of, I think they're Indonesian or Malaysian, but there was this dance that they do in the grave, like literally in the graveyard. So many people, and they're like, shouting and doing this weird coordinated dance in the graveyard. So it's something that it's not permissible in the deen to do, be it that they're dervishes spinning around or jumping on one foot or whatever. Doesn't matter. So this is not right. And look at the evidence that they use, right? When you want to find something, you can find anything, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Sa'ad that strike the ground with your foot. So they think that this is like dancing. This is the evidence for it. it would have been better to just not cite this stuff online, how, but then again, it shows the intention of people, right? So dancing is something that it's not permissible as in ibadah or anything like that. They can be war dances, okay? That's something that we see that the Sahabas used to do, and we see the Prophet ﷺ looking at and assisting with Aisha of the Ethiopian Habashi soldiers. So that was something that was permissible, okay? Because the Prophet himself looked at it. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she herself looked at it. So war dances are, something that is permissible. But these people start doing dances as ibadah and doing all kinds of movements and weird stuff as ibadah. Now, let's go down. Let's move to the next section. Okay. Section 5, Sufi's extreme case of excitement. They do get into these weird trances that they try to, where, it's either like through spinning or through repeating stuff and I do believe this is like induced by shaitan. It's like a drug almost, if you look at it. And they think it's so amazing and they feel good and this and that. And the dervishes are a perfect example of that, on how they, they do come in this trance where they put their heads on the side, down on the shoulder, something, they spin with their hands spread out and their dresses that they wear. And they consider that as an act of worship. So anything like that that's considered as an act of worship to get you closer to Allah, you think that it's going to get you closer to Allah. Well, this is a bid'ah. This is the definition of a bid'ah, brothers and sisters. Try to remember, because sometimes people throw the word bid'ah and they don't know what it means. But this is the definition of bid'ah. Like you expect reward from Allah, right? And you're changing basically the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So keep that in mind. So a bid'ah is an innovation within the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hoping to get more reward, thinking you are doing something amazing or something good. Yet you're not, you're just basically doing something horrible, right? And bid'ah is so subtle because you don't know sometimes like what you're doing. Some people don't know what they're doing. So you have to be very, very careful. That's what the Prophet said, that that in every bid'ah is a dalalah, is a misguidance. And every misguidance is in finnar. Okay?
Right. Question again, Sheikh.
Yes.
It's not uncommon when we see people doing tahleel at the masajid or whatever gatherings that they have. When they do the tahleel, la ilaha illallah, they start to
right.
their heads or even their bodies. Is that considered as part of this?
Right. Right. Yeah, this is again wrong. Like la ilaha illallah, and they move their heads. Or even, subhanAllah, I was reading recently a fatwa, like one mistake that is done by maybe all of us actually. It is moving the head back and forth and rocking while you're reading Quran or you're trying to memorize. This is not from the Sunnah.
Yeah.
This is something that we shouldn't be doing. Now, even I find myself when I'm like memorizing and I'm trying to read, that I'm like moving. I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? It's like in this rhythm. And then I don't really have to do it actually if I'm conscious about it. But yeah, we do it. And I've seen, the Yahud, when they pray, they move their heads like that back and forth towards the wall. And even when they memorize the Torah, they do that. And I looked at some videos, and it's so true. It is so, so true that the Yahud, when they memorize their Torah, or they try to, or they read or they worship, they move back and forth, they rock. Or when they worship towards the wall, they rock. And this is not permissible, because it's not, we don't see in the Sunnah of Prophet any event in which the Sahaba used to rock back and forth when they're reading Quran or memorizing the Quran. It's interesting that they try to justify these actions by actually finding someone who's going to, like an ayah or something that they're trying to link to. Now, let's go up. Okay, yeah, ripping up their clothes. Okay, and before we go to that, just please, remind yourself whenever you memorize Quran next, or you are reading next, right? Try to control your movement. I know it's not easy, because you might be like, this gives me rhythm and so on and so forth. Yes, true. But again, Allah will remove the barakah because you're doing this like, bid'ah. So if he's ripping up their clothes, okay, interesting one, right? Now, people used to do that in Jahiliyyah, okay, when they rip up their clothes, mean certain things. But now they're like, it's shown as a sign of aestheticism. And this is wrong. This is very, very wrong. And a lot of behavior like that is erratic and is miscalculated. This is ridiculous that people do something like that when they come into this state of excitement, or they feel like they're closer to Allah. And they're like, they rip their clothes off like a wrestler. I've seen some people doing that, some dyes. Sometimes they get excited, or Rohingya or Uyghurs, and then they rip their clothes off. And it's like, yeah, it's a sign of you're trying to be strong. But it's not going to really do anything, right? It's not, right? So, yes, some of the Sufis used to do that, and as a sign of piety and righteousness. And this is not a sign of piety and righteousness, right? Keep that in mind. We don't really see people doing that these days, right? But I've seen a few times some videos of some brothers doing this, and it's quite amusing and funny that they should lower themselves to the standard. Okay, let's go to the next.
Just like they are in trance.
Yeah, it's weird, because all these things, if you look at it, there are these trances, these weird moods that are, if you actually see that person who's in it, you will think that, as a first scenario, that, this person's, got some issues, psycho. And Shaitan, he plays with your mind. He is in your mind. He's gonna try to communicate things, to misrepresent, to twist you, to turn you. But it's in the mind of a human being. Now, and that's why this awareness of your behavior is very important in ibadah. And no matter what we do, in the end, we try our best to be aware. Okay. Let's go down. I guess can read details if you're interested in any of these sections to know more examples. Interesting, Ibn Al-Jawzi, like he gives so many examples and the names, and one would wonder, like, how did he remember all these things? He didn't have access to a library that he would have to pick things and search them every year. He wrote from memory and he wrote from experience, and yet he is given authentic chains of narration. He is given authentic stories, and so on and so forth. So it's amazing. He was like this, I guess he was like a genius computer mind. And most of the ulama would do that. They could sit down and write. Sometimes we have to like research the hadith and quote, the extractor. But for them, it was like in there, it was built in. That was the deception of Sufis in accompanying young boys. Okay, very good. All right, so known that most of the Sufis have been barred against themselves, the door of looking at strange women by keeping a distance from their company. So a lot of them basically they restrict themselves from actually being married or having women. They think it's like kind of like the priest, the Catholic priest, right? And kind of like the outcome would be the same. They have young boys around them, just like the young priests, altar boys. And yes, some of them, they have fallen into that kind of fitna of the less sexual intercourse and relations with the young boys. And the Arabs would have this actually. Something from the Jahiliyyah. We find Arabic poetry describing the love of a man for a young boy. And it's disgusting, but the Arabs would have this type of homosexuality and attraction towards young boys, and it was not their masculinity that attracted, it was their softness and that's why the Prophet forbade the Sahaba and men in general from looking at young beardless men or boys with no beard, okay, who had like feminine features. Okay. So that's something that we noticed. And the Sufis here, they avoid one thing, supposedly the fitna of women, they fall into the fitna of homosexuality. SubhanAllah. Now, okay. We're not going to go to the categories, but subhanAllah, again, look at Ibn Qayyim, and he gives 7 categories, of these type of people. He, subhanAllah, like what an observant man, what an observant scholar, and how well he organizes his book. Again, keep in mind, no Google search, no Maktaba Shamila, no typing mechanisms, just from the mind and from Allah. No. Yeah, I don't want to read necessarily over this. If you guys want, if you're interested in understanding, gonna stop here. Yeah, just a little bit more about the tendencies of the old Arabs. We find this weird fascination. Like homosexuality was part of the behavior until today. It is of the Arabs. The Bedu. Even when I was there dealing with the Bedu, they had that in them. There was something like they don't consider themselves as homosexual by engaging with younger boys. They consider a person homosexual if he receives this. If he gives it, he's not. So it was something that was very prevalent actually in the society. Of course, it's haram on so many different levels, but it was interesting to understand their mindset about it, right? So my students sometimes they would approach me and they would say, "Oh, teacher, these guys are homosexuals and they think it's okay." And sometimes I would talk to the students, and they're like, the attitude is like, "Well, it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal," and so on and so forth. It's just fun. We're just men, right? It was just always being treated like not a big deal, right? And this is how the shaitan deceives someone. It's like, it's not a big deal. This issue is not a big deal. It is a big deal. Right? It's a huge deal. So the Prophet didn't allow people today, warned them against the punishment. Is so severe, actually, subhanAllah. And I just wanted to make points here on this because obviously we're entering June. It's the so-called, month. I hate it because my month, I was born in June. But yeah, they have this like Pride Month, right? And it's so sad, but interesting enough, this desire for young boys, something that we find a huge deviation by the Catholic priests, by the old Arabs. They don't go for like young girls, they go for young boys, which is interesting. Shaitan played with them so much that it led them to this extreme when they could, many of them, get married and so on. But Shaitan is very tricky in how he deceives the people. And now it's their month, these homosexuals. And what's coming next is so strong. It's going to be pedophilia, right? Pedophilia is going to be something that has been pushed really, really hard onto people. And the statistical diagnostic manual, I think the 5th version that's being used now, they've tried to make an adjustment to what pedophilia means. Okay. Now, one thing that for sure they were able to manage in changing was the definition of a pedophile and the labels to like minor attracted person, I think. Right, that'll be the term now, a legal term, minor attracted person. Like you would have before, like homosexual, faggot, gay, this, that. Now, the words have been changed. They're more professional. They're same-sex attraction, right? Homosexuality is now same-sex attraction. It doesn't have that negative connotation, right? So the same thing with pedophilia. It'll be called minor attracted person. But a minor can be, wait a second, America, minor is 18. 17, you're still a minor. Well, I mean, it goes down to everything. So yeah, it's a mess. It's a big, big mess. Now, okay, repentance, tawbah, an excessive crime. Okay, this is something here that when it comes to tawbah, can you cry? Are you allowed to cry? Should you cry? What if you don't cry? What happens if you don't cry? Is that a sign of insincerity? Right? I'm sure you've all witnessed du'as where people cry. Ameen, Ameen. Oh Allah, destroy the enemies of Islam. Ameen. People like sobbing and crying. No, a lot of us like that. We feel connected to that. We enjoy that. But then we see a book like this and we realize that, is that really good? Is that really good? If someone cannot control themselves and slips, has an emotional breakdown, that can happen. But for someone to like always, do that, Allahu Alam, and you have to, it goes back to intention. You know yourself, right? The Imam knows himself. We know Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he couldn't lead the prayers. That's why Aisha radiallahu anha did not, or would try to reason with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not to allow him. So, Sister Shima, we can't see the notes anymore. Sister Shima, are you there? Cannot see the notes. Stop sharing the screen. Sister Shima, if you're there, please share the notes. I think she's not. Anyway, we'll continue until she comes up back. Maybe something happened. So when it comes to crying and wailing and all that, right, it's, we need to avoid it. So Abu Bakr used to do it but it was sincere. It was hard for him to control himself. Umar Khattab radiallahu anh would cry. Like we find some of the hadith that you find it's like almost like, wait a second, is this an exaggeration? They're crying till their beards are wet and all that, but it's not, subhanAllah. Like the Arabs would be so emotional and they would cry till their beards are soaking wet, right? So it's not exciting, but the question is here, niyyah, intention. Should you be looking for this? What's in your head when you do that? That's the difficult part. May Allah protect you from lack of ikhlas. We should always have ikhlas. I think it's extremely important to at least be aware whether we are sincere or not sincere, no matter what the consequences are. May Allah protect us. Okay. No. All right. So again, Iblis is going to get people to feel closer to Allah by certain behaviors that are violating intention, violating Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Even if we find some evidence that the Sahaba did certain things, right? They did it because they were sincere. There's no doubt about it. For us, we do have to question our sincerity. We do have to be careful that we don't fall into bid'ah with a lack of questions, with the lack of sincerity. No. Okay, so we covered the Sufis, I guess, a behavior of the awareness, what we said, and the Wajd, and the consciousness, the conscious behavior. We covered their erratic behavior when it comes to screaming, shouting, clapping. We covered their desire for the dancing, the singing, the jumping. We covered their accompanying of young boys, even though they're trying to avoid women. So many problems that we see with these people, subhanAllah. Yet they claim to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that they do. And it is attractive. Like if you ever see, subhanAllah, the war dances of the Sufis, will make dhikr, the Chechens and so on, right? It's like, wow, they're like, shouting takbir and Allah, Allah. But then they turn that into just ibadah now, worship and gatherings and ijtimas where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending, and his displeasure upon them. Now, okay, let's go down here. Getting too close to the sin to the point of falling into it. Okay. Some, having approached temptation and fitna, have fallen into it, getting no profit from their possessions of patience and striving. Idris ibn Idris said, I witnessed in Egypt certain Sufis who had with them a beardless boy who sang to them, subhanAllah, right? One of the Sufis was overcome by his feelings and not knowing what to do said, my friend, say La ilaha illallah. The boy said it. The Sufi said, I must kiss the mouth that has said La ilaha illallah, subhanAllah, right? Look how bad it gets. You look at the emotions of the Arabs. So then they continued to stare at the boys until they felt the temptation, and they're aroused by Satan basically, and Satan just seduces them into the sin. Okay, so a person has to know the limits, right? It's interesting enough how, again, just because it's the month that's coming of these people, the alphabet people, it's interesting how Arabs and the ulama used to treat this. It was not treated like, oh my God, he gay, this and that. It was literally just like a desire or a fitna that has to be controlled. And a person has to man up. You cannot, do this. And as I said, a lot of them, they were just not unmanly, they were manly. It was just that their behavior and the surroundings and so on. So, or the way they looked at homosexuality and this behavior was very different than way we look at it today. And I think going back to understanding the way the Muslims look at it and the way they treat it and dealt with it would help a lot of people today to understand how Islam really looks at it. And it will make them at least calm down and just realize what are the limitations, as opposed to like really trying hard to suppress certain things and becoming depressed and things, an identity issue and this and that, and parents suffering and children suffering and so on, right? There's an identity confusion that the society pushes onto people when it comes to these gender issues and homosexuality and so on. So people have now an identity, as opposed to, it's like it was a sin before and a fitna, right? Now it's like for them, it's like, no, I have to assume a certain identity, a certain label, a certain they, them pronoun, right? Which is ridiculous again. So confusion versus sin. In Islam, homosexuality is a sin. People can have desires and all that, but they're sins. And for the non-Muslims, it's an issue of identity, of who you are. Raise your hand in the air, is that your Pride Month? Stuff like no. Okay. So let's go down. And because Ibn Al-Jawzi talks about it here, it was obviously quite popular. If he addresses it and decides to give us a section about it, it means it was quite popular. Now, the benefits of having knowledge and the danger of gazing. Everyone who lacks knowledge will become confused, right? Exactly. And he who gains knowledge but does not act upon it will become even more confused. Okay. So, and subhanAllah, with knowledge, you can understand yourself better. You might not be able to be the best practicing, but you'll understand who you are and what the issues are, what you're supposed to do. It's very extremely important. So you don't get confused. Not everyone's going to be a scholar, but at least basics you can see, fundamentals of a believer, right? Fundamentals. Now, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said the danger to a scholar from a beardless boy is greater than that from a wild beast. SubhanAllah. Right? Look at that. That's a very, very strong statement. Again, if this is Omar is saying that, like the Arabs were affected by this, right? Okay. Now again, a beardless young boy has a certain femininity, and these strong men, these harsh men of war, were attracted to feminine things. They wouldn't see girls that often on the street, but the boys were there. So they would basically have to deal with this. SubhanAllah. It's a big issue if he's mentioned over and over again. Abu Sa'ib said, I fear more for a worshipper from a lad than from 70 virgins. SubhanAllah. Allahu Akbar. Right? Abu Ali al-Rodbari said, I heard Junaid say a man came to Ahmed ibn Hanbal, accompanied by a handsome boy. Okay. Ahmed asked who he was. The man said, my son. Ahmed said, do not bring him with you next time. When the man rose to go, it was said about him, Allah prosper the Sheikh. He, the visitor, is a virtuous man, and his son even more so. Ahmed replied, their virtue does not affect our purpose in this matter. My conduct is that which I have seen my sheikhs observe, and the same as they told us of their predecessors, Salaf. Right? Some said, beware of these young boys, and others have said, whoever accompanies the youngsters will fall into evil ways. May Allah protect, subhanAllah. So interesting to look, I don't know, as a as a heterosexual straight man, to look at this, right? Like that young boys would be considered attractive by the Arabs of old. And Ibn al-Jawzi, remember, right, later on, right, which means that this issue was still something that was there at its time. Yes.
I think it should not be beware of these young boys, but instead to warn the boys to beware of the older men.
Yeah, so you have here homosexuality and you have here pedophilia to an extent. But again, subhanAllah, like I've seen this even when I lived in the Arab lands. I'm not sure how it is in Malaysia. I don't think it's that spread.
No,
but as a culture, but as a culture in Arabia, it was like, I remember even when I was a school principal and a teacher before that, like there was always like the senior boys would date the younger boys. Like let's say in high school, the grade 12s would be like always trying to go to the younger grade 9s or anything like that. And, try to have they would say the little girlfriends, which is so weird. It's a Muslim country and a Muslim, right? And they'll have this saying like they want to go show them the pigeons in the attic, which would mean they wanted to do some bad stuff. So, we had to fight this kind of behavior amongst them. Even now, you're talking about 21st century, right? Very, very strange behavior. And they would never consider, I was out down, like, this is gay, isn't it? And they're like, no, it's not gay. And I'm like, yes, it is gay. So it was very weird. So some of them were like good, and they would, because it was brought to my attention by some boys actually. They said, teacher, like, can you talk to the boys in our class, because this is what they do, and this is what they believe, and this is not right. And they would defend themselves like, no, teacher, it's not really like that. It's all good. We like girls, but boys, So they would have something like statement like, women are for children and boys are for fun. So that's weird. And even till now, you find in the Khalij the culture of bringing Filipino young, like, because they look very feminine, haircutting salons. They have these gay Filipino looking boys cutting hair, and it's been a culture. And Sharjah, for example, wouldn't allow that, but now I discovered even Sharjah now brings these kind of people. Some more conservative cities are allowing this to happen. So pretty much in the Khalij, if you go to like haircutting place in general, not all, but it'll be like, ran by, these kind of people. I don't know. Very, very weird.
By the way, Sheikh,
okay.
we know that Sufism is more widespread in countries like Turkey, Chechnya, and the likes. Yeah, is this behavior the same in those countries as well? So you kept on mentioning Arabs.
Yeah, I think honestly, I found it only with the Arabs, and it is found with the Pakistanis and the Afghanis. So the Afghanis and Pakistanis would have this, again, a very interesting phenomenon of having these dancing boys. You might have some documentaries even on Al Jazeera, I think, did a few documentaries on this. And they would have these like that, even at the time, like Taliban, before the previous regime, this was happening, where they would have these like young dancing boys. And again, it's like, because it's boys, right? There's nothing wrong. It's just boys, right? Boys and boys. But they would have these like very young, feminine, dressed like looking, and they would dance to entertain the man. And then, of course, as Ibn Al-Jawzi said, they would fall into these sins, right? And same with like jockeys. The Pakistanis would have these races, camel or donkey or whatever, horse races, and they would groom these young boys to be jockeys. And again, I think there is a documentary on this on Al Jazeera about the jockeys, and then I think now they replaced them with like robots. But they would have these young boys, and they would use jockeys as young boys because they're not heavy and they're easy to control. Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's, you know, in which other cultures, but yeah, Afghan, Pakistani, Arab, I would say these are like the most prevalent ones. And again, you know, it's like interesting because it's linked to different activities: dancing, singing, and racing. You know, oddly and strange enough, like camel racing or horse racing. Okay. So now, right, and yeah, so the deception is funny because again, they think it's like what's boys, right? Boys and boys, and you find that a lot in Muslim countries actually. You know, this type of where people don't really pay attention. They think, no, it's like halal. Boys and boys are there. They can spend time together. Girls and girls, no one questions it, right? So they split the schools. They split the curriculum. They split the physical space separation, gender separation in the masjid and so on, which is okay, of course. But they forgot that, wait a second, there's this fitna here. And in Muslim countries, so much more. I think it's because there's separation without tarbiyah is going to lead to these issues, right? A person has to have to give tarbiyah to people so they can change, as opposed to just saying stuff. Yeah. Okay, so keeping away from young man. We said this is again the same thing. Very, very interesting how much time he spent in developing this. Okay, accompanying young boys, right? Look, it says it's one of Iblis's strongest ropes by which he captures the Sufis. I don't know why he, Joseph like keeps attacking the Sufis. It's not something exclusive to the Sufis, okay? They would take the apprentice, I think, so disciples, the Sufis would have these young disciples, and this would cause them to fall into fitna. But I don't think it's exclusive to the Sufis, this type of behavior. I think it is quite widespread among others. Now, the punishment which follows gazing on the beardless. Of course, Abdullah ibn Jala said, I was gazing on a handsome Christian boy when Abu Abdullah al-Balkhi passed by and asked me why I was standing. I said, oh, uncle, do you not see this figure? How can he be punished with hellfire? He slapped me between the shoulders, saying, you will experience the consequence of this, though it may be after a time. I experienced the consequence after 40 years in forgetting the entire Quran. SubhanAllah. Allahu Akbar. Here, interesting lesson to draw is that number one, consequences of our sins, and Allah forgives. And number two, after how long it can happen. Sometimes we get so calm that, yeah, it's fine, I have sins, but nothing happens. But the consequence can be felt so late on. So late on. Allah Akbar. All right, 11, the deception of the Sufis in their profession of reliance, the tawakkul, the rejection of means, okay, which is al-asbab, and carelessness of wealth. Now, the person said, I traveled for many years, but only experienced true reliance, like full tawakkul of Allah. Because I was on a boat, it crashed and I fell into the water. I held on a piece of wood And I thought to myself, Allah wanted for you to drown, then you had have done this. Would this piece of wood help? I let go of the piece of wood and floated on the water until I reached the shore. Now, so Abu Yaqub Zayyat was asked about a lion. So he took a dirham, which was in his pocket, and gave it away. Then he discussed with lions and said, I was ashamed to reply to you while anything was in my possession. SubhanAllah. Right? So tawakkul, it's an interesting concept because وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. Yani, what does tawakkul really mean? How do you really rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fully? There's tawakkul and then there's tawakkul. Tawakkul is false reliance, where you think that, yeah, khalas, everything will be fine. Everything is from Allah. It doesn't matter. This and that. Right? And tawakkul is really, like we see, a trust in Allah. Okay? Akal wa tawakkul. It's a trust in Allah that is warranted by the Sunnah of the Prophet, that a believer should, in the end, realize that you do your best, right? Aql, you do your means, you do whatever you can, you tie your camel, and then the outcomes are only up to Allah. Outcomes are only up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You measure the outcomes, okay, up to what Allah wills. And khalas, what can you do? You do your best, and Allah will do the rest. That's basically what we can summarize it in, right? And it's something that a lot of people have an issue with because it is part of the qadr and the aqidah of the believer to have tawakkul. And these days we don't really have tawakkul on Allah. We have tawakkul on our phones, we have tawakkul on ourselves. We have tawakkul on so many other things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here we shouldn't be misunderstanding everything has to do with wealth and money management. No. Okay, it can deal with so many different things, right? Risk comes on so many different ways. And not just that, just events in your life, just your qadr. You know, when you put your tawakkul on Allah, it's different, right? Now, let's go down. Okay, let's see here. Sufyan, let's go up. Sorry. Let's read that hadith. Sufyan ibn Uyayna said the explanation of reliance at tawakkul is that a man should accept that which happens to him, right? So this is linked to qadar, as I said. I want to talk to you a little bit about this concept called indifference. And I think it's really linked to tawakkul in the end and to qadr. And a lot of people suffer in the world. I was talking to someone yesterday. Because we feel sometimes that we're too much in control of things. Like, I can do this, or I could have done this, or and then it affects how we are and how we feel. Like, we start getting hurt and upset if things don't work our way. But if you were to be indifferent to the outcomes, and what does indifference mean? It doesn't mean not to care. Okay, and I want you to pay attention here, because this can be something huge to change your outlook on life. A lot of people suffer and they get depressed and sad in their lives because of what? Because they feel like somehow, maybe if I would have done this, or if I would have done that, or if I would have controlled this, maybe if I would have changed that, things would have been different. Then my son would have not done that, or my daughter would have not done that, or they would not get sick, or if I just didn't take, them on this trip, they would have not gotten sick. And no, this is wrong. You have to be indifferent to the outcomes, not to the asbab. Okay, to the asbab, you cannot be indifferent. You have to do what you have to do. But the outcomes, what happens after that, you cannot control. It's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So if we can get our brains to understand that, look, I can only control what's in front of me, what I do. Once I do these things, I cannot say, oh, if, right? Because the if is what? What did the Prophet ﷺ say about if? It is the door of shaitan. If and only if I would have done this, and if only if I would have done that. If this would happen, that would happen. No, this is like rubbish. You cannot think that way. If you can control this mind of yours to accept that outcomes are only up to Allah, and that you should be indifferent, like not be affected, because how can you control something? You cannot control it. Therefore, why should you be affected by it? Right? So if something happens, your mindset should be all like, قدر الله ما شاء فعل, right? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. How many of us say these things when something affects them? And we don't. So try to train your brain to be indifferent to the outcomes. If it's going to be good, something good will happen. We grow a bit, alhamdulillah. Gonna go down a little bit, something not so good happen, alhamdulillah, right? What's important here is that no matter what, in the end, right, you will be okay, you will be satisfied, you will be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you're indifferent, you don't care. Whatever the outcomes are, you accept, and inshallah, you'll do your best next time. I think it will change. It'll be a game changer if we can get our minds to understand this issue of indifference. It's not carelessness. It is indifference. Whatever happens, if good, what is the Prophet said that this is the strangest affair of the believer. If something good happens, he thanks Allah. Something bad happens, he has patience. So it's like that. Right? The outcomes up to Allah. The believer is still always, taking the means and just doing what he's supposed to do. Yeah. Okay, let's stop here, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullah khair, and we'll see you next time. Subhanakallahu wa hamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.